Happy Frazetta Friday, Frazetta fans. I'm Sarah, and this is Frazetta Fridays with Frazetta Girls. Today we are going to be talking about perhaps one of the most influential pairings in history, Frank Frazetta and Conan the Barbarian. Robert E. Howard was just 26 years old when he created the iconic character Conan the Barbarian, who smashed the mold of his literary contemporaries. Howard's Conan didn't just participate in the world of sword and sorcery, he came to define it and rose as the genre's most formidable savage. Howard first introduced Conan in The Phoenix on the Sword, which was published in Weird Tales magazine. His stories of uninhibited freedom and sheer adventure quickly resonated with the Weird Tales audience. They couldn't get enough Conan. Conan was like none other. He embodied the fierce survival instincts and unstoppable will of a warrior, born with a complex moral code and insane physical ability. Despite his success with 21 published short stories of our favorite barbarian, Howard wanted more and aspired to expand Conan's adventure into a full-length novel titled The Hour of the Dragon. After laboring intensively on the manuscript, writing approximately 5,000 words a day for 2 months, Howard faced a terrible letdown when the intended publisher went bankrupt. By God's grace, or should I say, Crom's grace, Conan fans were eventually able to read the novel Howard worked so hard on when it was serialized in Weird Tales magazine. After the final publication of The Hour of the Dragon, Howard was confronted with harsh news that his mother's battle with tuberculosis was worsening. Howard was an only child and was deeply connected to his mother, who had nurtured his love for poetry and storytelling since he was a young boy. Their close bond was a profound influence on his life and his work. Overwhelmed by the prospect of losing her, Howard made preparations for both their passing with his literary agent. On June 11, 1936, he tragically ended his life with a gunshot. His mother passed away the very next day, marking a heartbreaking end of their intertwined lives. Though it seemed that the adventures of Conan might be consigned to oblivion because of his early demise, Robert E. Howard's legacy continued to live on in the world which he created so passionately. In 1950, Gnome Press licensed the rights from Howard's former literary agent and revived the stories. It was finally time for The Hour of the Dragon to become the novel that Howard intended it to be. The novel was titled Conan the Conqueror and was offered as a hardcover with a cover illustration by artist John Forte. The publication broke new ground, demonstrating Howard's stories were indeed timeless. This resurgence led to the release of 4 additional books that compiled all of Howard's Conan stories, but the growing interest didn't stop there. L. Sprague de Camp, the assigned editor, delved into Howard's unpublished manuscripts, transforming them into new Conan adventures. De Camp's involvement continued to evolve, and he eventually achieved control over the Conan stories and the Conan brand in general. De Camp then appointed Glenn Lord to be the new literary agent representing the property, and together they helped ignite the first Howard boom. In 1966, De Camp and Lord made a deal with Lancer Books to republish the Conan series. Under the editorship of Larry Shaw, they sought to publish the first comprehensive paperback series of the Conan saga. L. Sprague de Camp and editor Lynn Carter meticulously compiled existing stories by Howard along with pastiches and new works that they authored into a cohesive timeline that chronicled Conan's life. Larry Shaw was keenly aware of standout talents in the fantasy art community and understood the importance of landing a spectacular artist for the Conan series launch. Frank Frazetta, with his eye-catching covers for Lancer's The Secret People and Prime Phoenix, most known as Wolf Moon among Frazetta fans, captured Shaw's attention. Shaw proposed an offer Frazetta couldn't refuse. He nearly doubled his usual commission of $250 for $400 per cover, a figure approximating $3,800 today. He also coupled this with the assurance of returning the original artworks, a concession that was rarely made at this time. Frazetta accepted, and a new era of visual storytelling was ushered in. According to Frazetta, he waited until the very last week of his deadline to begin the cover for the first Conan paperback titled Conan the Adventurer. The only creative direction he received from Shaw was to do something as iconic as James Bama did for the first stock Savage cover. As the deadline loomed, Shaw nervously called Frazetta to make sure he had everything on track. Frazetta told Shaw that he had only just begun, but reassured him that he would get it to the office by the deadline. In typical Frazetta fashion, he arrived to Shaw's office on the very last day with the 1966 Conan the Adventurer illustration that would go on to become historic. Frazetta said when he unveiled Conan standing triumphantly over a towering pile of skeletons adorned with a Frazetta girl draped by the Barbarian's side, everyone in the Lancer headquarters began oohing and awing and popping champagne, and they had quite the celebration. On record, Frazetta later commented on this historical moment. He said, "I knew it was a new look. Nobody had ever seen anything quite like it. It changed the world of illustration. It sounds arrogant, I suppose, but it's true." Right? It's not arrogant. Frazetta was the man after this Conan cover went to market. Everyone was calling to congratulate him. Job offers were pouring in. He was on top of the world. It was all such a high until Roy Krinkle, his dear friend and mentor, let a bit of steam from the fiery engine of his. In late 1966, when Frazetta got the original Conan the Adventurer painting back, Roy paid him a visit. Roy, like everyone else, oohed and awed, and then bluntly said, and I quote, "This is great, Frankie, but you need to give him a fucking neck." And he had a point. I mean, Conan's shoulders were indeed up around his neck. Frazetta stood frozen and mystified as he took out his personal knife and turpentine and scraped off Conan's entire head. You'd think, how could someone get away with touching Frazetta's art? Roy Krinkle could do no wrong in Frazetta's eyes. Krinkle was more advanced at oil painting than Frazetta at this time, and he had a better grasp on anatomy, and Frazetta accepted those truths. Krinkle said Frazetta got right to work on the new head. He also reworked the girl and made her, again quoting Roy, "Frazetta yummy." After Conan's necessary revisions, Roy went on to suggest various scenes to Frazetta for the rest of the Conan covers, which was very helpful since Frazetta wasn't a reader and Roy was a literature connoisseur. Following the iconic Conan the Adventurer in 1967, Lancer published Conan, with the cover artwork better known as Conan Manape, in addition to Conan the Warrior, Conan the Usurper, and Conan the Conqueror. In 1968, Conan the Avenger came to market, and then in 1969, Conan of Cimmeria. A few years later, in 1971, Conan the Buccaneer was released, and that was the final Frazetta Conan paperback for Lancer. While Frazetta wished Howard would have been alive to see how he interpreted his character, Frazetta ultimately illustrated Conan his way, which arguably brought Howard's creation into a new level of popularity. In a later interview, Frazetta said, "I went right ahead and created this character that didn't even resemble Howard's description at all. Mine is quite a different guy. He was what I thought the barbarian should look like, the ultimate barbarian. Howard's description was quite different. He was leaner with shorter hair and hawkish features. I instead saw a scarred, real monster sort of guy. That's just the way I felt the guy should look at this point." Frazetta said he painted most of these artworks in a few days because he was so inspired while working on Conan. Most of the paintings were reworked when he received them back. The revision process sometimes could take weeks, even months, until he got them exactly to his liking. There was one other Conan painting titled Conan of Aquilonia, which was set to be published in 1972. Frazetta sent the original artwork to Lancer's office, per usual, and soon after was informed that the original artwork had gone missing. To this day, no one knows where the original painting ended up, and Frazetta was pissed. He was already having issues with them for quite some time, and this was really just the icing on it all. Lancer was extremely stingy with Frazetta's pay rate. The covers were selling insane numbers, and the best number they could come up with was an additional $200 for the last 3 covers. Lancer also decided to publish the Conan the Adventurer poster without Frazetta's prior knowledge or permission. Of course, if it had been intended simply as a store advertisement, Frazetta would have been fine with it, but Lancer sold thousands of copies without giving Frazetta a cut. So, after his original art went missing, he was out. He was done, he was never looking back. To add insult to injury, Lancer sold the rights to the paperbacks to Ace and, once again, cut Frazetta out of the deal. Lancer ended up filing bankruptcy in 1974. Although this relationship ended terribly, These paperback covers were undoubtedly Frazetta's landmark works. By the mid-1970s, Frazetta became a kind of industry unto himself. From his home in Pennsylvania, he and his wife Eleanor operated a little empire, sending off thousands of posters of his artwork to fans and retailers. The book, The Fantastic Art of Frank Frazetta, published by Bantam Books, sold over 300,000 copies. Frazetta was at his all-time high demand. In the late 1970s, as the team behind the 1982 film adaptation of the Conan the Barbarian was taking shape, the producers, of course, reached out to Frazetta. They extended an invitation for him to join the project as the production designer and to illustrate the movie poster. Frazetta, however, declined both offers. Having had negative experiences with the property in the past and loathing travel, he chose not to engage with the film adaptation. This decision, while understandable, was, in my opinion, a significant loss for the project. I believe Frazetta's vision as a production designer would have been profound. Sad. Despite his absence, the film producers rallied and assembled a team of other talented individuals, and it led to the movie's considerable success. While Frazetta was not directly involved with this film, his influence on the character portrayal is undeniable. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who secured the role as Conan, had a strong resemblance to the muscular, formidable figure Frazetta had popularized through his artwork. When Arnold initially booked the role, he said he was actually a bit intimidated because of Frazetta's paintings. Director John Milius was quoted saying, "Frank Frazetta is the high priest of Conan. We were all aware of this the entire time we were shooting the film. His Conan illustrations were more important to me than the books were." When Conan was remade in 2011, director Marcus Nispel echoed a similar remark to Milius. "In many ways, my access to Conan was Frank Frazetta. He was one of my heroes when I grew up. I just worshipped his stuff." Jason Momoa, who portrayed Conan in the 2011 film, accepted the role because of his admiration for Frazetta. He was quoted saying, "Both of my parents are painters, so I saw Frazetta's art when I was very young, and it's seared in my memory. I love his paintings. They're so amazing." The association between Frazetta and Conan has left a lasting legacy in both the art world and popular culture. Frazetta set a visual precedent that continues to influence how fantasy characters and settings are conceptualized and depicted. The popularity of Conan artwork has ensured that both his and Howard's legacies live on, celebrated by generations of fans and collectors. We will be celebrating the Frazetta Conan legacy this year at San Diego Comic-Con for a very special panel discussion. As always, thank you for joining me on another Frazetta Friday with Frazetta Girls. Until next time.